I was standing in my own living room when she walked through the front door like she owned the place. No knock. No hesitation. Just a calm, steady stride that made my stomach tighten before I even understood why. My husband Daniel had asked me to wait for him at home that afternoon. He said he had something important to tell me. So I waited. I made tea. I sat on the couch we picked out together 3 years ago. Then the door opened. And it wasn't Daniel. She was tall, well-dressed, and carried herself like someone who had never been told no. She looked around the room slowly, and then her eyes landed on me. I expected confusion. I expected an apology. Instead, she tilted her head and gave me a look I will never forget. It wasn't the look of a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. It was the look of a woman who had walked into exactly the right one and found someone she hadn't expected to still be there. "You need to leave," she said, just like that. No raised voice, no explanation. She said it the way you'd tell someone they'd sat in your seat on a bus. I laughed because I thought I had misheard her. I told her this was my home, didn't answer. She just said it again. "You need to leave. Both of you." That was when I heard the door behind her. Daniel had arrived. He stepped inside and stood beside her, and he still said nothing. I turned to my husband expecting him to correct her, to tell her she had the wrong address, the wrong person, the wrong life. But Daniel stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. In that silence, something cracked wide open inside my chest. Because I had been with this man for 6 years. I had loved him without question. That silence was the most honest thing he had ever shown me. Her name was Vanessa. Daniel finally said it like an introduction. Flat, like he was reading from a list. He said they had been together for 4 years. 4 years. I counted backward in my head. That meant it started just 2 years into our marriage. 8 months after I lost our first pregnancy and cried in his arms for a week. 1 year after I took a second job to help pay off his business debts. 4 years of a life I had never been shown. Then Vanessa said something that stopped everything. She said the house wasn't Daniel's. It was hers. She had bought it in her name 4 years ago. Daniel had moved me in 18 months later without telling her. She had only just found out. I looked at my husband. His jaw was tight. His eyes were on the floor. I understood then that I wasn't just losing a marriage. I was standing inside a lie so deep it had walls and a roof and a mortgage I had never seen. I thought about the down payment. Daniel had told me it came from a business investment that finally paid off. I remembered being so proud of us. I had painted the bedroom walls myself. I had planted flowers in the front yard. I had hosted Christmas dinner in that kitchen 2 years in a row. None of it was ours. Not the address. Not the walls. Not the memory of thinking it was home. It had all been built on a story that was never true. Vanessa told us to be out by the end of the week. Daniel nodded like a man already resigned to his fate. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I picked up my bag and walked to the bedroom, not because I was giving up, but because I needed to think. Somewhere beneath the shock, a quieter part of my brain had already started working, and it was telling me to be very, very careful about what I did next and in what order. Daniel followed me in and closed the door. He started talking, excuses layered on top of apologies. I let him. People say the most important things when they think you're too broken to that. Use the information. He mentioned a joint account I didn't recognize. He mentioned Vanessa's name and her company name in the same breath. Then he stopped, like he realized he had said too much. I kept my face still. I had already started building a list in my head. After he left the room, I sat still. I was thinking about something I had found 8 months ago. A bank statement that arrived in the mail addressed to Daniel from an account I didn't recognize. I remembered a small, cold feeling of unease. I had tucked it into my desk drawer instead of asking about it. I had been too afraid of what the answer might be. Sitting on that bed with the walls closing in, I was deeply, quietly grateful I had kept it. I opened my desk drawer before I packed a single piece of clothing. The statement was still there, folded into thirds. I unfolded it slowly. The account held both their names, Daniel Mercer and Vanessa Cole. The balance was 3 times what he had told me we had in our shared savings. 3 times. I had been cutting back on groceries, skipping my gym membership, telling myself we were still building. And all along, he had been building something else entirely. With her. I went through every paper in that drawer. I found 2 more statements, a lease agreement with Vanessa's company name on it, and one document that made my hands go completely still. It was a beneficiary update form, dated 14 months ago, removing my name from Daniel's life insurance policy and replacing it with hers. He had done it quietly, on purpose. That single piece of paper told me everything I needed to know about what this had always been. I took photos of everything on my phone. Then I folded the originals and placed them in my coat pocket, close to my body. I zipped my overnight bag with steady hands. By the time Daniel knocked on the bedroom door to check on me, I looked exactly the way he expected. Quiet, shattered, defeated. I let him believe that. The less he thought I knew, the more room I had to move. And I had a great deal of moving to do. Daniel dropped me at my sister Megan's apartment and said he needed time. I said okay. He kissed my forehead before driving away, and I remember thinking that was the last honest moment between us, even if it was hollow. Because by the time his car turned the corner, I was already calling my cousin Diane, who worked in financial law. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for one long moment. Diane told me the documents I had were significant. The joint account, the beneficiary change, the undisclosed assets. These weren't just personal betrayals. They had legal weight. She told me not to confront Daniel again, not to access any accounts, and not to say a word to anyone who might warn him. I had a narrow window, and I needed to use it correctly. She told me to come to her office in the morning with the originals. I told her I already had them on me. Over the next 5 days, Diane helped me build the full picture. The joint account held money transferred from our marital account in small amounts over 3 years, always under a round number, always on weekdays, always spaced apart. It added up to nearly $60,000. He had been quietly moving our savings piece by piece while I trusted him completely. While I cut back on expenses, while I believed we were building something real, he had been building something real. Just not with me. Diane explained the pattern to me. She said what he had done had a name. Structuring. It meant the transfers weren't impulsive. They were calculated, planned over a long stretch of time by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how to avoid detection. That was the moment the grief in my chest started to harden into something else. This wasn't a man who fell for another woman. This was a man who had decided, at some point, to quietly take apart my life. I spent those 5 days doing what felt unnatural to me, nothing visible. I answered Daniel's check-in texts with one-word replies. He told Vanessa I had gone quiet. She told him that was expected, that I was probably in shock. They were both comfortable and unguarded. That was exactly what I needed. Because while they relaxed, Diane was filing paperwork, I was signing documents, and the window I had was narrowing with every hour they spent believing I had already given up. On the 6th day, Daniel asked to meet. He said he wanted to work out a fair arrangement. Fair. I agreed to a coffee shop near Megan's place. I arrived early. I wore the coat with the documents in the pocket, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to feel them against my side while he talked. He arrived looking relaxed. He ordered coffee. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A proposed settlement. A small lump sum. No claim on any other assets, written like a favor. He tapped the paper and said it was the cleanest path forward. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I placed my phone on the table, screen up, and opened the first photo, the joint account statement with both their names. I watched his face. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes moved over the image slowly. I said nothing. I just let him look. Then I opened the second photo. Then the third. Each time he looked up, I held his gaze and waited. I told him I had everything. All 3 statements, the lease agreement, the beneficiary change. I said the word structuring out loud and watched the color leave his face. I told him a family law attorney had been retained, a forensic accountant engaged, and a report filed the previous afternoon. Every excuse he tried came out smaller than the last. I let him finish. Then I slid the settlement paper back across the table and told him his attorney would be hearing from mine before the week was out. I texted Vanessa that evening. One message. I told her the joint account was under legal review and that further transfers could be considered participation in financial misconduct. I attached a photo of the lease agreement and told her it would be part of the discovery process. I didn't ask for a reply. But Daniel called me 4 times within an hour of that text, which told me she had shown it to him. They were no longer comfortable, no longer quiet, no longer sure of what I knew or what I had already set in motion. The legal process took 4 months. Daniel's attorney tried to minimize the significance of the transfers. The forensic accountant's report made that impossible. Every contested asset was reviewed. The statements, the pattern, the beneficiary change, the undisclosed property arrangements. The judge ruled in my favor across the board. The marital estate was divided based on actual contributions. The siphoned funds were ordered repaid with interest, and the ruling was read out loud in a courtroom while I sat still and breathed. I moved into my own apartment 2 weeks after the final ruling. It was smaller than the house I had painted and planted flowers in, but every wall in it was mine. I hung a photo of my mother above the kitchen table. I made tea in a mug I chose myself. Megan helped me carry boxes. Diane brought food. I sat in a home that wasn't built on someone else's story for the first time in years. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, like I could breathe. They thought they had taken everything from me. But the truth is, the only thing they ever had was what I allowed them to have. Be honest. If you were in my position, would you have shown him the evidence right there at that coffee table? Or would you have walked away without saying a word?